Hi guys, I'm here to answer another question from our Q&A. These are questions we didn't quite get to on our webinars that we offer twice a month for our premium app subscribers. So today's question. I have been going through derealization or brain fog for 2 years, which developed from my anxiety. I mean, I feel disconnected from my surroundings and have memory problems and can't figure out how to deal with it. This is another topic that comes up on every single webinar. DP and DR. Depersonalization and derealization. And just for a quick explanation, if you're not sure what those are, depersonalization is when you're in a very heightened state and you're very aware of yourself and living inside yourself, and it all feels weird. Questions might come up like, who even am I and who's moving my body? And that's like my face and that's like my nose, but it doesn't feel like my face. It feels weird. Derealization also feels weird. Derealization is more about the outside world looking and feeling weird. Feeling disconnected, everything feels fake. A similar thing I try and compare it to is like when you feel deja vu and everything feels almost like this weird magical sort of state and words don't really do that state justice. That's sort of how depersonalization and derealization feel. And it's usually attached to being in a heightened state. And it feels so weird because you're in a heightened state, you're super aware of how disconnected you are. Rather than feeling disconnected, you're very aware of disconnected, and that usually scares the crap out of people. And now DPDR oftentimes comes when you're feeling a little dissociated, which for all intents and purposes means disconnected. And disconnected is one piece of our fight or flight survival mode. Fight, flee, freeze, and protect. And oftentimes we disconnect to protect. So if your body is in a heightened state and you happen to be in this sort of disconnected mode and you're in a heightened state, okay, the heightened state is to be aware of danger. And what happens is we become very aware of our disconnected state, and then the disconnected state gets marked as danger. From talking about DPDR every day for so many years, honestly, what I see, the way I view DPDR, this weird sort of state becomes an obsession, okay? And most people get so stuck in it because this is not me, this is not normal, what's wrong with me? Usually the story is hooked to some version of, I broke my brain somehow, this is me on my way to turning crazy, some version of irreparable damage, I'm never gonna get out of this. And then this truly becomes the obsession. This gets marked as danger, and a lot of people are trying really hard to feel more grounded, to feel more connected, to get rid of this feeling, and they keep checking in to see if it's gone. That's more the template of OCD, where the content of what you're fighting is less important than what's keeping the cycle going, okay? So if you're stuck in DPDR and your focus is so strongly hooked to not feeling this feeling anymore, getting back to the old me, it's probably going to keep you more tuned in and more aware of that feeling and more resisting and more trying and more grounding and more doing and more checking. And that's what keeps the cycle going. And so then all these wellness things you're doing to try and feel more connected are probably becoming compulsive behaviors. And the disconnected feeling has now become the obsession. And if that's the case for you, you're going to follow the DARE approach. It's going to be the same mindset. And DARE is very similar to what you might hear in the world of OCD, which is ERP, exposure and response prevention. And exposure and response prevention truly means allow yourself to be exposed to the thing that's creating distress, that you have these danger stories hooked to, that's creating these feelings in your body that you find highly unpleasant. And then response prevention, those words sort of come together. It means do something other than the thing you've been doing all the time before. And response prevention is to really just change your compulsive behaviors. As you guys might have heard me say before, I call these doing disorders, involvement disorders and doing disorders. And now the doing that you're doing about this thing doesn't get rid of it. It just turns it into an obsession. And all of the things you're doing to try and get rid of it become compulsive behaviors. The context for this particular clip is on DPDR, but I want you to try and look at it as no different than somebody might treat some other version of sensory motor OCD. or an intrusive thought, or whatever else we get hooked to with the story of, I have to get rid of this thing or else. And it's the getting rid of I want you to look at more, not the thing you're trying to get rid of. And this is hard to wrap your mind around, especially when you're like, oh, she doesn't know what she's talking about. There's no way she's felt this feeling before. It doesn't matter really what the O is. It doesn't matter the content so much. For this particular question, it's DPDR. And weirdly, again, it's a weird backwards approach. The approach is to get better at being at the state that you're in. And that means get better at allowing yourself to be whatever, disconnected or tired or shaky or anxious or sad or whatever the state is that you're in. It's the resistance to that state that keeps the cycle going. And so even in the question, I'm having a hard time figuring out how to deal with it. It's a dealing disorder. The more you try and do something about it, the more you send your message back to your alarm that this is important because it's based on behavior. And with that mindset, the message your alarm gets is, okay, when she feels connected, she's fine with that. But when she feels disconnected, she does a lot to get rid of it. So connected must be safe and disconnected must be danger. So every time she feels disconnected and that's danger, your alarm's going to send you a whoosh, as it should, if it thinks something present is dangerous. So now not only are you disconnected, now you have a whoosh of energy to clearly show you how disconnected you are so that you can do something about it. You see how it's the doing that keeps it going? And this is so hard. It's so hard because it doesn't require work or doing or effort. It requires the opposite of that, which is hard on a different kind of level because it requires surrendering. It requires vulnerability. It requires relinquishing control. It requires truly just surrendering to the coulds and to the what ifs. Because you're probably not fighting the state as much as you're fighting the story you have hooked to the state. Okay, if you knew this disconnected state was going to be over in 5 minutes, you would just leave it alone, right? But you probably have a danger story hooked to it. Some version of feeling this way is a sign of crazy, and I better get rid of this feeling to prove I'm not going to go crazy. Or a forever story hooked to it. Oh gosh, this feeling is so awful. What if it lasts forever? Oh my gosh, if it lasts forever, I can't be a good mom if I feel so disconnected to my kids or to my partner. How am I going to perform at work? And what if I never stop thinking about being disconnected? You see how the stories, the future stories, the what ifs are really what fuels the fight. Dare is about eliminating the fight of, not getting rid of the feeling of. And so for this context, it's going to be, how do I get better at allowing myself to feel disconnected? Period. Full stop. And I do that by changing the danger stories I tell and by changing the behavior I engaged in. That is a super simplified version of this. I'm just trying to keep it short for a quick-ish type answer. But check out our webinar. We talk about this all the time. I post a lot about this on my Instagram page. And if you would like your question answered in the webinar, sign up for our Dare app and you can submit a question there and we can answer your question live. Bye everyone. See you next time.